In 2003, a 21-year-old American completely crushed it on the North American hardcourt swing. He was talented, outspoken, and unapologetic as he etched his name into the history books.
Game, set, match, rub it.
22 years later, another young American is looking to pull off what no man has done in decades. Ben Shelton's title run in Toronto wasn't just a statement, it was a warning shot. Just how good can he get? And can he actually win the US Open?
Ben Shelton is the singular one.
If you've been following this channel, you probably know that I've been all in on Shelton for a while now. Earlier this year, I even made a prediction that Ben was going to win Miami. And he didn't. As a matter of fact, he lost in the first round. To Coleman Wong? Some folks said that I had an American bias, and others laughed and said it was never gonna happen. But in reality, I was just 5 months early. So what exactly's changed? Well, let me tell you. When Shelton first showed up on tour, he had the luxury of being an X factor. He had the tools to beat anyone. The big game, the serve, power, athleticism, fitness, and of course, that lefty advantage. Sometimes he pulled off insane results. Other times, it got ugly. And once players knew what they were up against, it became more difficult for Shelton to find a consistent winning formula. On top of that, the weaknesses in his game were glaring. But in the span of 18 months since we first talked about him, Ben has evolved a whole lot, and Toronto might have just shown us what Ben Shelton 2.0 looks like. Shelton was in form coming to Canada. He reached the quarterfinal at Wimbledon and the semis in DC. With Sinner, Alcaraz, and Novak all sitting this one out, Shelton entered the tournament as one of the favorites, coming in as the 4th seed. Shelton faced fellow lefty Mannarino in the opening round, a player who's owned him twice before. This time though, different story. Shelton was straight up unconscious on the serve. 16 aces, 28 of 31 first serve points won. Ben hit his spots really well and was dominant for most of the match, not to mention that he also looked dialed in on the return. But on the other hand, Ben showed a lot of patience. He also hit spinnier, higher margin forehands, many of which pushed Mannarino off the baseline and instantly put him on the back foot. The end result, Ben got the job done in 65 minutes, but a much tougher test awaited him in the next round. See, Shelton has been Nakashima's kryptonite. The scoreboard always looks so darn close, but Ben has always found a way to win all 5 of their matches. This time though, Nakashima pushed Ben all the way. He looked like the better player at times, but Shelton turned up clutch when it mattered most. Once again, Ben relied on his serve to do the heavy lifting. After a wayward backhand at 8-9 in the first set tiebreak cost Shelton the set, Ben hit the reset button, getting the early break in the second, and from there, he never really looked back. Both players were neck and neck in the third set. However, Shelton continued to pepper Nakashima with tons of aces down the tee, which Nakashima never really adjusted to. I mean, look at where all these aces landed. 19 aces and 46 winners to Nakashima's 19 winners on the other side. So, while in the opening round, we saw Ben adapt to a player with a completely different style of play, the second round against Nakashima saw Ben execute on a strategy over and over again. But something was off in the round of 16 against Caboli. Big Ben was gunning for his 100th tour-level win, but Caboli nearly spoiled the party. Shelton broke Caboli at the death to steal the first set 6-4. Caboli's serve then caught fire in the second set, and coupled with some insane returning, Caboli drew level. And with the momentum on his side, he was looking to put the match to bed when he served for the match at 5-4 in the third. However, his forehand proved to be his undoing. Too many loose forehands coupled with a serve that went MIA saw Shelton break back and force a tiebreak, which he won 7-1. Once again, the intangibles were on full display. Shelton is an opportunist. If you give him a second chance, you'll be sure to pay for it. Give him a favorable draw at slams, and well, you'll find him in the semis. Seeing Shelton come through against a really tough opponent who forced him into longer rallies felt like the next step in Shelton's evolution. The mental toughness was palpable, to say the least. Now, I should mention that not a lot of credibility was given to Shelton's top 10 debut by opposing fans. How is this guy number 7 with no titles in the last 16 months or even a top 10 win this year? Well, valid question. de Minaur was supposed to expose Shelton in the quarterfinal. But instead, Ben put on a clinic, and all those questions were answered emphatically as Ben snapped the Aussies' 7-match winning streak. But here's what blew my mind. Ben wasn't just overpowering de Minaur, he was outthinking him. Slicing to de Minaur's forehand, staying patient, mixing up the rally balls, and making the Aussie beat himself. That's next level stuff. In addition to the Demon's serve already being somewhat of a liability, he also got outplayed from the back of the court as Ben was mostly the one controlling the pace. I'll admit it, seeing Shelton win extended rallies against de Minaur like this wasn't exactly on my bingo card. In the end, it was a comfortable 91-minute victory for Big Ben. A flawless performance to reach the last four in Toronto. Oh, and I should totally mention, Shelton was 0-3 in Masters 1000 quarterfinals prior to this win. But what exactly changed with Ben's backhand? I'm sure we'll find out when we take a look at his performance against Fritz in the semifinal. With Shelton's first top 10 win of the year in the bag, the confidence carried over to the semifinal against Fritz. For just the fourth time since the turn of the century, we got an All-American semifinal at a Masters 1000, and Shelton cooked. Ben produced arguably his best performance of the summer. If you thought Shelton was just a big server with no baseline play, this match torched that narrative. Shelton's point construction was off the charts. He knew when to draw Fritz in with the drop shot and then hit him with a lob. He knew when to adjust his return position, and he also picked the perfect time to attack the net. Plus, the weight of shot behind Shelton's backhand, not to mention the ridiculous down-the-line forehands, were super impressive to watch. At times, Shelton made Fritz look powerless and flustered. At the end of the day, yet another test Shelton passed with flying colors. Seeing Ben winning the longer rallies against de Minaur and Fritz proved to me that his back-to-back top 10 wins weren't just a flash in the pan. But the job still wasn't done yet. A resurgent Karen Khachanov was the final hurdle standing between Shelton and Masters 1000 glory. Khachanov was returning to a Masters 1000 final for the first time in 7 years after taking down the top seed Zverev in the semis. At this point, Shelton had already proven that he could either overpower or simply outlast any opponent. However, Khachanov is an absolute 6'6" tank. He can bank on his physicality, consistency from the baseline, his compact swings, reliable backhand, and the ability to absorb Shelton's firepower. And with Khachanov also being the more experienced player, the final could have gone either way. With both players seeking their first title of 2025, it all came down to the tiny little margins. Shelton is one of the game's best frontrunners, but the win over Karen was underpinned by his ability to survive adversity and play from behind. Khachanov blasted 10 forehand winners in the opening set, and his power pinned Shelton deep behind the baseline. At 5-4, Khachanov failed to serve out the first set though. Shelton then had 3 set points of his own at 5-6, but failed to convert and ultimately lost the tiebreak. Many other players would have folded, but not Ben. Despite the disappointment of losing 3 set points, he doubled down on swinging freely. Following the advice of his father Brian, who we're gonna talk about later on in the video, Shelton worked his way up the court in the second and third sets to take a more aggressive stance. In the second set, Shelton had to rally from love 40 down to serve out the second set and force a decider. It's not something that we see happen frequently. And then, serving from behind in the biggest match of his life, against a player breezing through a string of service games, Shelton was able to force his way to a third set tiebreak of the tournament. The match was a nail-biter throughout. Both players won 49 points in the first set and 29 apiece in the second, before Shelton won 36 points in the third set to Khachanov's 31. All in all, Shelton brought out his best tennis when it mattered most, and the final proved a few key things that are going to be crucial to his US Open success. Shelton's glaring weakness on the return has been an open secret for the longest time. According to Tennis Insights, Shelton's 52-week return score places him in 50th place. However, Shelton punched way above that average and made his way into the top 15 with a 7.1 score, showing that he can be a lot more offensive on the return. Another key dynamic that played out was seeing Shelton adjust to the constant pressure that Khachanov piled on his backhand. Khachanov forced Shelton into hitting more backhands, and it just so happened to be that Shelton's backhand not only held firm, but even outperformed expectations. Shelton was driving the backhand down the middle and cross-court with relative ease. As a matter of fact, Tennis Insights had Shelton's backhand rated higher than his forehand in the final. And let me tell you, this is literally the best his backhand has ever been. When he wasn't using the backhand slice to reset points, he was slicing short or going for drop shots to draw opponents forward before hitting them with a lob. The slice is nowhere near as fluid or as effective as the likes of Musetti or Dimitrov, but this is a good starting point for Ben. Shelton was far more disciplined and willing to bide his time when Khachanov was dictating from the baseline, and the implication of this? A massive jump in Shelton's steal score. Steal score is the percentage of points won by a player while defending. Essentially, it's a measure of a player's ability to turn defense into winning plays. You measure a steal score by dividing the number of points won while defending by the total number of points played while in a defensive position. Shelton's 52-week steal score was ranked in the bottom 10% on tour, but his 34% steal score in Toronto put him actually inside the top 15. Historically, returns have been just about the hardest part of a player's game to work on, and while we're going off of only 2 weeks, the reality is that we might quite possibly be witnessing the final piece of the puzzle, the last missing piece that could turn Shelton into a slam winner.
But Shelton hasn't only just turned his weaknesses into strengths, he's also taken his strengths to the next level.
Shelton dominated the 0 to 4 shot rally category all tournament thanks mostly to his serve. Khachanov struggled with the liveliness of Shelton's ball on the serve and got completely outclassed 78 to 54 in the short rallies. Coupled with his huge and multifaceted serve, Shelton's firepower on the forehand ends points quickly on serve before he then proceeds to build more pressure on the opponent after quick holds. I should also mention that now, more than ever, Shelton has been willing to move forward behind even his second serve. First, he forces you into a deep return position with a nasty kicker, and then follows that up with short, clinical volleys. Again, we saw glimpses of that in the Toronto final. Shelton's backhand might be what everyone is talking about at the moment, but the forehand is also seeing some evolution too. In addition to the firepower, which we all know about, Shelton has expanded his bag of tricks with more variety off the forehand. He plays with more height and spin on the shot, which helps him to open up more angles. Shades of Rafa? Maybe? But perhaps the most important thing might be that Shelton has finally learned that you don't need to go for the spectacular every so often to win points. Still, Shelton's biggest upside might just be his net game. Expanding his bag of tricks, adding more variety, soft hands, and creating a lot less rhythm would be crucial to challenging Sinner and Alcaraz in the future. He already has the pure power and athleticism for starters, but Ben sometimes had mixed results at the net in Toronto. All that said, if there's anything we can all agree on, it's the fact that he was always willing to attack the net even when he sometimes looks awkward doing so. The shot selection is also improving constantly, and Ben continues to play fearless tennis.
But let's be real here, guys. How significant was Shelton's win in Toronto, and does he really have what it takes to rival Sinner and Alcaraz?
The Canadian Open has been prone to a truckload of upsets in the last decade. With more top players finding the National Bank Open incompatible with their calendar, it's been a good hunting ground for first-time winners and top 20 players looking for that major breakthrough at a big event. And for Shelton, it does help a bit that the best 3 players in the world pulled out, but that doesn't take away any credit from his achievements. Canada was a little bit slower than the conditions in DC or Miami, and it seemed to favor Big Ben. Before the tournament, he was 11-3 in slams, but just 4-5 in Masters 1000s this year, which is a pretty insane gap if we're being honest. Shelton had a bunch of early losses in best-of-3 formats, which meant that he didn't regularly test himself against top 10 players as often as he would have liked. For this reason, it looked like he hadn't proven himself to be a top 10 player. But now, all that has changed. Shelton had back-to-back top 10 wins, both of which he won in straight sets by the way, plus 4 top 20 wins, which further add to his body of work. Shelton is now the youngest American man to win a Masters title since Andy Roddick in 2004, the first player to win an ATP Masters 1000 event with 3 deciding tiebreaks won along the way since the format's introduction in 1990. Shelton is also the youngest American to defeat 4 ATP top 20 opponents at a single event since Pete Sampras at Indian Wells in 1994. Ben is only the 6th player born in the 2000s to win an ATP Masters 1000 title, and it's a 3rd career ATP title for Big Ben, and he's now sitting at a career high of number 6 in the world.
One shift that has perhaps driven Shelton's recent improvement is a greater emphasis on scouting and strategy.
Ben says that watching more tennis matches has been a huge piece for him lately. He watches at least one match or a set from start to finish to study his opponents, which further shows how invested Shelton is in maximizing his potential. Before now, he thought he could easily impose his will on the court against anyone. But now he's maybe older, wiser, and has a more mature tennis mind. Sometimes it's easy to forget that it's only his 3rd full season on tour and that he also didn't play juniors. He hasn't been competing at the highest level for long, which makes it all the more interesting to see just how high his ceiling really is. Shelton is no Sinner or Alcaraz. He's carving out his own path.
I never thought that I'd be in this position after 2-3 years on tour. It almost seems like I did it slow, compared to some of these other guys.
Once upon a time, reaching the top 10, winning a Masters 1000, and reaching 2 Grand Slam semifinals at the age of 22 was actually considered special. But now to the big question. Does Ben have what it takes to rival Sinner and Alcaraz?
Only 4 men have reached the second week at all 3 slams in 2025. Jannik, Carlos, Novak, and yeah, you guessed right, Ben Shelton. One of his criticisms has been about coming up short against the big 2 and Novak at slams, and in tiebreaks especially. It gets even worse when you look at Ben's head-to-head against both players. He's 1-6 against Sinner and 0-3 against Alcaraz.
But should we be bothered? I don't think so.
Let me take you back to the late 2000s when Novak was looking to break the Federer-Nadal duopoly. Djokovic suffered a number of tough losses to both players. He lost his first 4 matches against Federer and won only 2 of their first 9 encounters.
It gets even worse when you look at the early numbers against Nadal.
Novak only won 4 of their first 18 matches and suffered many crushing losses, including 5 in a row against Rafa between 2008 and 2009. But look how he turned it around. Or should we talk about the Sinner-Medvedev head-to-head and how one-sided it was before it completely flipped? We don't know how long it's going to take for Shelton. It might take him a bit longer to learn how to beat Sinner and Alcaraz, which still shouldn't be a problem. Don't forget he took a set off Alcaraz at Roland Garros and was able to push Carlos more than a bit. Apart from having a good record on hard courts this season, Shelton has made good inroads on the natural surfaces, clay and grass. Plus, he's been getting the all-important big match experience by playing Sinner and Alcaraz more frequently at slams.
If Jannik and Carlos are way above everyone else and Novak is right behind them, then Shelton is surely in that second tier of players among the likes of Fritz, Zverev, and Draper. Sure, Shelton's resume might not be as polished as the others, but based on level alone, he's definitely in that same category. Now, here's the big difference though. When it comes to the Americans, Shelton's upside is, I'd say, the highest among the group, and it's not even close.
Taylor Fritz is an absolute workhorse. I still don't know how he's managed to play close to 80 matches each season for the last 3 years. Fritz is steady. However, when it comes to the big stage, a player who's ready to turn up clutch in a stadium packed with fans in the biggest match of his life, I'm taking Ben every time. Plus, Ben has so much upside compared to the other Americans. Tommy Paul and Tiafoe might have played close to their best tennis, and I really hope I'm wrong with this, and Korda is always hurt. Mickelson and Nakashima and all the other players don't have the weapons Ben has. And how about we take a look at Ben's head-to-head against the other top American men? Shelton doesn't have a losing record against any of the top 5 Americans. Seeing Shelton achieve so much success with the help of his father leaves me wondering why anyone would hate on this partnership. I just don't get it. First of all, some fans get salty with Brian's coaching of Ben during matches. But spoiler alert, coaching is legal. Secondly, if you talk to any pro player about the significance of coaching, they'll likely tell you that you'll likely get positive affirmations and reminders to do certain things like maybe being more aggressive and maybe a few specific strategies here or there. Nothing more. You could get the best coaching, but the execution is completely up to you. Brian and Ben have a healthy coach-parent-child dynamic, which should be appreciated more than ever in a time where we've seen failed parent coaching. Here's what Ben says about the partnership.
A father who believes in me, who pushes me, someone who's honest with me.
But what's even more shocking is the fact that naysayers once thought Brian wasn't good enough to be a coach for Ben. Let's not forget that Brian was a top 55 player back in the day, and while he never reached the height Ben has at 22, he still has a lot of valuable insights to provide. Brian has coached multiple teams to NCAA championships, and both parties have a lot of trust and mutual respect for each other. Shelton's father provides a grounding effect and a calming presence for Ben. And while he doesn't sugarcoat words, he knows when to allow Ben to do his thing. Just because you weren't a top player doesn't mean that you can't be a great coach. And as a matter of fact, sometimes average players who had to go through the rigors of training hard to maximize their talents might be better coaches than the athletes who hit the genetic lottery. Ben turned pro in 2022, and just 3 years after, he's on the cusp of becoming a top 5 player. Not sure what more you can ask for in a coach there. Another coach with maybe more technical expertise or a different outlook to the game can be added to the team and would definitely be needed at some point, but at the end of the day, only players can decide for themselves. But for now, if it ain't broke, why bother fixing it? At the moment, Ben needs to consolidate his stay in the top 10. He's currently 4th in the ATP race to Turin, putting him in a good position to qualify for the Nitto ATP Finals for the first time.
Shelton is coming off a solid quarterfinal run at Cincinnati, where he got past Camilo Ugo Carabelli, RBA, and a stubborn Yuri Lehechka, before running out of steam against Zverev. He was 1 win away from cracking the top 5, but ultimately saw his 9-match winning streak get snapped. Now, Ben has enough time to recharge his batteries and prepare for New York. How far do you guys have him going in New York, and am I completely delusional to say that I have him in the last 4 once again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.